started. And so by that, I mean, I will briefly introduce, you are here at the Code for Philly meetup. And there's our nice little the Code for Philly logo presenter. So Code for Philly is an all-volunteer organization working on social good projects. We need so much help. So if you're a developer, project manager, designer, anything that you might be interested, Code for Philly can definitely find a way for you to get involved. And the best way to do that would be to go to codeforphilly.org and check it out and go to the Slack. And then once you join the Slack, there'll be some start here information, and there's a cool new video, Code for Philly 101, that you can check out as well, for a little bit more about Code for Philly. And we have a new program happening, Code for Philly's first ever fellowship. And so we have a few fellows from over, I believe, 100 applicants. We had lots of applicants, maybe over 200. But so these fellows are working on Code for Philly projects paid to get paid work experience in tech working on social good projects. And what we have during the fellowship is a few career related sessions with a couple topics. So the topics will be writing, speaking, and then generally career. And today we have Vicki Boykis, person at large on the internet, who runs a very popular newsletter and writing about technical topics. So for our fellows, hope this will help them toward the goal of, at the end of the fellowship, they'll be writing up about their experience with the fellowship, perhaps something that they worked on, but otherwise contributing to the Code for Philly blog. And so we're having this session, and we opened it to everyone at Code for Philly to talk about technical writing. And now my cat is here, and I'm going to hand it over to Vicki.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks so much for having me. Let me share my screen, and thank you to everybody for taking the time after work, after probably doing a lot of Zooms, to be on your good computer and share this time with me. So let me know if you can if you can see my screen.
I can see it.
Awesome. Okay. Here are my slides. See if I can make it even bigger. All right. Cool. Okay. So Code for Philly asked me to talk about blogging and how you can have a technical presence on the internet. And so I'm going to share a little bit about my story and then tell you maybe some tips for how to get started writing technical content. And then we can do a Q&A, we can ask questions. I can't see the questions right now, but I will come back after I make my screen small, minimize it, the technical term, and we can discuss anything that comes up as the presentation. So this is going to be super casual. I have maybe about like 20-25 minutes of slides if I ramble. And then we can get to any of your questions about technical writing. And the goal is to make it less intimidating. If you're intimidated, make it accessible and make it interesting and something you want to pursue, because I think that everybody should be writing on the internet, but I'm a little biased. So a little about me. I am a machine learning engineer at Automatic, which is the company that powers WordPress.com. And if you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen that we're hiring. We're hiring for a ton of different roles. We were one of the first companies to do remote way back 10 plus years ago. And so we've been doing remote for a long time, which is great during the pandemic. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message or check out the page. I personally have been blogging for 10 plus years. I want to say it's been 12 now, maybe 13 or 14. I started way back in GeoCities, way back. It wasn't really a blog. It was more like adding different icons, the little men doing the construction with the GIF moving, and then adding some text. Of course, I had my moody teen Zanga that unfortunately is no longer online. I used Blogger, and then I used WordPress for a long time. Recently, I've been using WordPress, Get Pages, and Substack. And Get Pages is a static site generator that's really good for technical content. And Substack is a newsletter, so that's where my newsletter is at. If you want to find me, I'm on Twitter at Boykis, and my website is vickyboykis.com. So that's me. A little bit about my blogs right now. So I kind of have three. You do not need to have three blogs. I'm just crazy because I always am thinking about like a good way to separate or divide the topics that I talk about. I find that they all kind of bleed over into each other anyway. So I have a personal blog that I used to be super active on, and that was the blog that I got started with back in 2008. And it was literally about my life. And so I used to blog maybe 2-3 times a week. And that got much more sporadic. As you can see, my sad 2020 has only one entry, which is my favorite books of last year. For some reason, I find it a little bit harder to share some personal stuff online these days. I'm hoping to come back to it, but we'll see how it goes. And then I started my tech blog. So my personal, and I'll put these slides up so you can go to all of these links. So my personal blog is blog.vickyboykis.com. Then there's my tech blog, which is vkb.github.io. And that's all about, let me actually go to here so you can see them. Oops. Okay, so here's my personal blog. You can see, here's my content. I have a lot of just random stuff in here. So like my favorite books of the last year. I have a lot of like tech overlap posts, just some random stuff. Some are long, some are really short. And then I also have my technical blog, which is really mostly about tech. So my latest one is about getting machine learning to production. And these tend to be kind of long, and it's about how I made basically like GPT. So this was before GPT-3 came out, and GPT-3 is an AI tool that lets you generate text based on like a huge amount of training data. So I had this idea that I would make kind of like a medium clone, and it would take the first couple pieces of first couple sentences of blog posts from venture capitalists and kind of like fill in the rest, and you could have a think piece and you could refresh it. And so this was all about writing, how to do that, talking about how I did it, talking about some of the code that I put in there. Really, really very long. If you have 5 million hours, you can read that. So that's kind of my technical blog. And then lately, I've also been writing a newsletter, which is called Normcore Tech, because I think someone on Twitter said that I was like the queen of very normcore / boring tech takes, as in like you don't need Kafka, for example, or you don't need this tool, or don't think about the hype of this, or just like really digging into stuff beyond the news cycle. And so I started that last year. This is Substack's layout, and this goes out as a newsletter. I started this last year, and I've been writing it once a weekish, although over the past couple of weeks I haven't written it all because it's been a little crazy. But yeah, I try to send out 1 or 2 a week. And it's all sorts of different topics too. It's tech, but it's more general. It's kind of like a very think piecey, what does this mean for society kind of tech thing. So they all bleed into each other in some way, but they're all separate. But I'm always thinking about like what the best way to combine them or not combine them is. So those are my 3 blogs right now. I would say, so my personal blog is not very well updated. I would like it to be more updated. My tech blog takes me a long time to write. And so it's updated maybe once a month or so. And my newsletter goes out once or twice a week. As you can see, they're all very different. They have very different approaches. There's a lot of different approaches to blogging, a lot of different ways to think about topics. I'll get into that a little bit later, but you can see there's like a huge variety just in the content that I have. I didn't get to this point where I'm like generating all this content just right away. So this is how my blog used to be before. I used to have like really fun, crazy personal stuff. And then my design evolved, and you can see I'm getting a lot more boring. And so this was kind of like the personal side. And then I'm like, okay, well, maybe I want to get a little bit more serious, and I want to blog specifically about tech topics and have the tech community talk about some of this stuff. So this is where my tech blog came into play. So let's see. So I would love to convince you to blog. And so I'm going to talk about what blogging has done for me personally. So first of all, I want to say that I put my blog on my resume all the time, and almost every single interview that I've had for the past 5 years, I've been asked about it, or I've had the opportunity to bring it up myself. So it's a fantastic tool to differentiate yourself and to talk about yourself a little bit more beyond what it says in your resume, because someone can see it. And so immediately, let's say you're applying for a job, they will go, if you have a website on there, chances are they will go to the website. And when I've been in a position to hire, I always go to the person's website if it's there, not to take a deep dive, but just to take a look around and see what kind of person I'm talking to, because a blog is a representation of your thoughts. So it's like, okay, well, what would it be like to work with this person? What are their thoughts on X, Y, and Z? And it doesn't even really matter what the topic is, as long as it's interesting and it's presented in a well thought out way. So for me personally, I'm always asked about it. Or I have the chance, if someone asks me, tell about a time when you did X or Y, I can say, okay, well, here's a time I did X, and here's what it looks like on my blog. Like, for example, here is what getting machine learning to production looked like for me. This is a project I worked on. I can walk you through it. And if you're interested in reading more about it, you can go to my blog and read about it. It also serves as a personal Google for me. So, and this is something a lot of people have said as well, when you do something, you tend to forget about it. And so when you go, oftentimes when I Google something, I'll come up on my old blog posts, if I'm looking for that specific thing. So this is a great way to write down what you're working on or what you've worked on, and have that in your back pocket for yourself, and also let people see what you've worked on as well. It also gives you,
Vicky, I
yes,
just want to interrupt you because we do have a relevant question that I
yes,
just wanted to check. Someone has asked if it is okay if they screenshotted the slide to put on Twitter. Is that okay with
sure,
you?
totally, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, go for it.
All right, cool. Just want to check on that. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. It also gives you a sense of authority, because you're writing about it. When you write about something, it gives you the sense that you know more about it, and it also lets other people know that you know about this specific topic, because you've researched it. So this ties into the sharper writing aspect. But when you're writing about something, it makes you formulate your thoughts in a slightly clearer way. So because the way that we think about something, it's not really linear. The way our brain thinks about things, we connect different aspects in different ways, but when you put it on paper, you're forced to make it very clear. And especially when you're writing for an audience, you want to make it as clear as possible. And so in that process, you kind of figure out whether you know something or not, and if you don't, what you should research and what you should add to it. So not only does it give you a sense of perceived authority, it gives you a sense of real authority. And as a result of some of my blog posts, I've been asked to potentially write technical articles or books or other things. Networking. If you have a blog and you start to build it and it's useful to other people and you share it, people will email you, especially if you write useful stuff. For example, if there's something that you know that other people don't, they want to reach out to you and say thanks. I've gotten a lot of those emails. Those are really nice to get. Or I work in this field also, and here's something that I know. Those are also cool to get. So it's not like you're actively seeking out to make these connections to people, but if people find you and see that you have this topic or this expertise that you need, it kind of brings them to you. So it's a great way to do that. Sharper writing. The more that you write, the more that you learn to write for a technical audience. And so, like I said, I've been blogging for maybe 10 years, and I feel like only really in the last 3 or 4 have I gotten a voice down. So it takes a while, depending on how much you write, but it helps you to understand how to communicate with technical audiences, which is good for both the internet and for at work, especially now that we're all remote and there's a lot more potentially writing going on. It really helps you to figure out how to make your case in text. And also, I think that blogging, personal blogging, makes the internet better, because there's a lot of cruft out there on the internet. There's a lot of content that's clickbaity. There's a lot of stuff that's filled and stuffed with ads. the more personal content there is, the better it is for everybody, because we can learn from that and we can kind of beat like the algorithm to push the clickbaity stuff to the top by filling it with good content. So this kind of echoes that. So this is a post, and again, I will put the slides up. I have a post called "Fix the Internet by Writing Good Stuff and Be Nice to People." This is kind of like a big pipe dream of mine a couple years ago. But the idea is that the internet right now is saturated with ads. It's segregated among Facebook, Twitter, and Medium. And the way to fight that is by writing good long blog posts about stuff that's interesting to you. So for me, blogging is important because it lets me own my own platform and voice in an internet that's a lot of the times, and I'm also guilty of participating in it, filled with short-term tweets or like really, sometimes you'll see a really cool thread, but then you'll never be able to find it again. Or you'll see a Facebook post that's like a screenshot of a post, which you won't see. So blogging is a way to fight all of that, and to let you own your own platform and to let you own your own voice and be in control of that. So blogging is good. Do not take my word for it. So what I did a couple of days ago is I asked people to talk about what they like about blogging, what it's brought for them. And so I have a whole thread of that. Let me make this smaller. So this was the tweet that I put up. And I basically asked, if you have a technical blog and it's brought you some positives, I'd love to hear about them, specifically for this talk. And there was something like 80 responses. So here are all the people, and you can peruse this. Here are all the people who had positive things to say about what blogging has done for them. Here are links to their blogs, examples. So Julia Silgi, who is a data scientist, she talked about the fact that I think there are too many good things that have come my way because of my public technical writing than I could even remember or count up. So just for reference, here's her blog. She blogs, she's a statistics blogger, and she has, as a result, written a book. She's previously worked at Stack Overflow. I think right now she's at our studio. And you can see kind of like how reading her blog lets her showcase what she's working on. So she has a video here, talks about her thought process of data exploration, for example, lets her showcase the code that she's working on, and kind of lets her take a thought from beginning to end. And so this is great because let's say, for example, if I'm an employer or a recruiter, I can look at this and say, oh, wow, this is fantastic. She's done all this work. If I'm someone who needs reference to this stuff, I can say, oh, wow, this is really great. I can follow along with it. And if I'm Julia, I have it in my back pocket, both for myself to reference and for other people to look at. So let's talk about some other examples. Here is Jessica Kerr, who also does a lot of technical blogging and tech talks. Here she says, more than once I've hit a problem, Googled it, and Google took me to my own blog. And so here's her blog. You can see that she is a software developer. You can see she has her consulting business here. So if you're interested in hiring her for some stuff, you can actually see how she thinks. And maybe if you like some of the stuff that she talks about, it's a networking opportunity, and you say, oh, I like what you talk about, I want to hire you. So there's her blog. Let's see what else. John said, I started building my data science portfolio. It's led to numerous new contacts, a couple of freelance gigs, and a job offer. So here's John's blog. And you can see that he also, so a lot of this is kind of skewed towards data stuff because a lot of my followers are data people, but you can see other examples as well. Let's see. I find it weird to, Neil says, I find it weird to hear, but I read one of your blog posts that's come up countless times while I've been on the hiring side of the table. So this is someone who does hiring and starts a conversation with the person who's being hired. It also works the other way when you're being hired and someone might have seen your blog post. So here's Neil's blog. And he has a bunch of posts as well about machine learning and software engineering. Brandon says, I started writing answers to interview questions I bombed and discovered that other people were interested in them too. So here is his blog, and he has actually a class. So he converted his blog from posts into a course, which then he was able to monetize. Allison says it's a net positive for me career-wise. My first blog post was noted by a collaborator and led to him joining as a co-author on a book and helped me get my current job at our studio. And so here's Allison's blog. So you can see that it's her homepage, and then she also has her blog here. And she talks about how she taught some stuff virtually. And as I'm showing these, you can get a sense for how different the blogs are, how different the content is, and how differently people portray themselves on blogs. It's all technical blogging, but it all looks very different, and it can be a wide variety of things. And then Julia, who runs one of my favorite blogs, says there are way too many positives, but I started blogging seriously because I was unhappy with my job, and so it was my media strategy to get a better job. And so Julia blogs at jevans.ca. And the way she does it is with categories, and she has a ton, and it actually, I think, partially led to her leaving her job and working on zines and web comics. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. But there is no really right way to blog. Oops. There's no right way to blog. There's, as I showed you, there's a ton of different ways to do it. There's a couple of wrong ways that you can think about blogging. One, again, if this is a technical blog, so presumably you are writing it both for yourself to remember, to have that content, to own it, and also for other people to consume, and potentially for future employers and for other people in the industry. So being needlessly negative and unprofessional, you probably don't want to do that on a professional blog. The second thing is try to gain metrics instead of writing to your interests. So I talked a lot before about how the internet is filled with SEO spam. So just keywords, and not really a sense for a human writing it and a human thinking about it. So when someone reads your blog, they want to see that there's a person on the other side. They want to know your thought process. They want to get to know you. They want to sympathize with you and cheer for you. So just writing about hot topics or keywords that are popular right now just because they're popular doesn't make sense. You want to write about stuff that is relevant and that interests you. Never updating your blog. So I'm guilty of this for my personal blog. But if you decide to blog, it's a good idea to pick a cadence and stick to it. People like to read blogs that have been updated often, at least, I don't know, once a month, twice a month. It's great if you can blog every week. It's harder for technical content because a lot of times you need to pull things together and research it. But if people see that there's a pattern and that it's been updated pretty frequently, they're more likely to find it reliable or interesting or subscribe to your content. And another one is giving up and expecting fame and fortune right away. So I personally did not start blogging because I was expecting to be read by a lot of people. I started blogging because I love to write and I was interested in writing, and the audience was kind of like a side thing. And also, like I said, I didn't really develop my blogging voice until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So to expect to launch your blog right away and understand what you're doing, get into a flow, don't worry about it. Like, it might take you a while. You might experiment. In the process of writing posts, you're going to figure out what your voice is, what your direction is, who your audience is, how to spread the word about that stuff, all of that. So don't expect it right away. But the sooner you start, the more you start to figure it out. So here's some more examples I thought I'd share. So there's a couple of different ways to blog, which I showed you. One is you can have a personal blog, or you can have just posts. You can showcase something that you've done technically. You can showcase meta, so like thinking about how to think about something technically. You can showcase your work as a diary. So Simon does this really well. So basically what he does is he describes things that he's learned, And you can see this on his code. So this is TIL, today I learned, .simonwilson.net. And it comes from a repository, and so this builds from that. And I think he has instructions about how to do that. So each of these is something that he's learned on a given day, and as you can see, they're not very long. They don't need to be flashy. None of your blogs need to be like 5 million words long. They can just be something like this. And so he keeps this for himself. And you can see, so escaping strings in bash using exclamation point colon q. And so these are very short, and he has links to other things. And this is really great because I can look at it too and say, oh, okay, this is cool. I can see where he did this and what he did this with. And he has all the different sections that he's worked with before. So that's a cool idea. Another cool idea, like I said, is Julia Evans, where she has a collection of posts. You can do it by category. So you can have both dates and categories. And so hers are cool computer tools ideas, computer networking, such as what happens when you update your DNS, which kind of brings me to another point. A really good strategy to blog is say, I don't know this, but we're going to learn this together. And so she talks through how she does this. There's all these instructions. There's technical reference, there's code, and there's a lot of different sections for it too. So that's a way you can do it. You can do it. You can blog about how Allison said, how I taught this virtually. So she talks about why she decided to teach it and her goals for teaching it, and then how it took place, and then planned it out. So this is good reference for anyone who wants to do something virtually. This is fantastic. So there's a bunch of different ways to blog. I think the most important thing to take away is blogging is marketing your thoughts to others, and also a way for you to own a piece of the internet as well. So how do I start blogging? So this might be overwhelming if you've never done it before. The number one thing I would recommend first is buying your own domain name. So I have vickyboykis.com. I would recommend buying your name if you can, but you can pick almost anything that makes sense and that's easy to remember or type in, and that's relatively cheap, because you want to own your own platform usually. And then you want to pick the platform that will give you the least resistance for blogging. So it's kind of a common joke among developers that in order to be initiated as a developer, you need to build your own static blogging platform. And I actually know a lot that have done that. You don't need to do that. You just need to pick whatever it is, whichever tool you decide, that's going to let you sit down and write on a regular basis without having to mess with too much stuff every time you do it. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. Have a list of running topics that you're thinking about. And this can be anything from I learned to do X today, or this is what I should do, or some thoughts about industry. And as you can see in my content, I have kind of a combination of three. So I have very technical deep dives that I do on machine learning and Python. I have higher level stuff that I cover in my newsletter, which is like the state of the tech industry, or where do we go from here? Or you don't need Kafka, that kind of stuff. So you can do a mix. You just have to decide what you want to do. You don't have to decide immediately, but once you start blogging, you'll get a feel for what you like to do and what you're good at doing. And then you'll kind of fall into that niche. Having someone who will read over your posts is good. It can be a friend, it can be your mom, your partner, literally anybody. If you don't have anybody, you can read it to yourself out loud. That's also a great way to catch spelling mistakes, typos, all of that kind of stuff before you send it out. So my husband reads over a lot of my content just to make sure it sounds like it flows, it makes sense to a reader, all that kind of stuff. And the next thing to do is read a lot of blogs. So it's said about being a writer. If you want to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader. And this is true for blogs as well. Pick the ones that you're interested in, read them, understand the context of the topics that you're operating in. A good place to kind of get a feel for this is Hacker News. The comments are not so great. Sometimes they devolve into just inanity. But I like to read Hacker News every day just to see what's going on, where the conversations are. It's also a great place to find blogs. I also find blogs through my Twitter feed. a lot of the time, and you can kind of get a feel for like which technical topics you're interested in, what people are already talking about. You can link back to them. So it's a great way to do things that way. And you can read a lot of the resources that I've posted here that I'll post in the chat as well. What should I read for inspiration? So Paul Graham is the canonical person to read. So I actually wrote a post about him in a newsletter. Remember when he used to be right? So he says a lot of really, really out there things these days, but a while back, he used to write these essays. They're kind of like the canonical tech read, and you can see that I have haters click through because I thought it was a funny read. So his later stuff is not as good, but his earlier stuff is very good because it lets you see how to blog to a technical audience. There's also Lara Hogan. She has a really good blog about tech leadership. So I have a bunch of very, very different links on here. And all of them blog about technical things in some capacity, and they are all very good examples, just to give you a very, very broad swath of things. And then also in my tweet, you can see that there are tons of people with blogs who you can read and check out and think about. And this is wonderful. There's like 70 or 80 people in here who have talked about their blogs, what they do, why they do it. So I really recommend, ironically, you read this Twitter thread, and I should probably write this up as a blog post as well. So just another idea out of a prompt that I had. Let's see, what else? So now you're reading, now you're writing. What do I write about? Write about the sandwich. So there's a really good book called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. It's about how to write. It's mostly about how to write a novel or an essay, but I really recommend everyone who's thinking about doing any kind of writing read it because it talks about a lot of the topics that all writers think about. And so one of the things she talks about is inspiration. A lot of people come to her and say, I don't have anything to write about. I literally have no idea what to write about. So she always tells them to write about school lunches. And so what she says is that even a single memory can trigger a whole flood of things. So for example, they describe what their sandwich was, the shape of their bag, the way their parents wrote their signatures on their lunch bag. So just from there, you get started. So you can, okay, I have nothing to write about. Write about how frustrated you are with Zoom. Write about how you read your email in Outlook. Just even like mundane stuff can bring about interesting topics because there are a lot of topics and people want to read about a lot of them. I would literally read a blog post about how someone handles their email every day. And there are a lot of topics about that. So just brainstorm and keep a running list of stuff that you want to write about. Let's see what else. Okay, so now what? So now you have your ideas, you've read people. Where do I go from here? So obviously I'm going to mention WordPress.com, which they're going to yell at me about because it should be capitalized. WordPress.com is a really easy way to start a free blog. We also have paid plans if you need more than that, but it's a great way to start for free. We also have a blogging university and a blogging webinar. So if you do want to use WordPress, this is probably the least hassle way to do it because we manage everything for you. There are some features that are not available. So if you are interested, you can read about it and see if it's right for you. There's also Jamstack. So Git pages. That basically allows you to create statically compiled blogs through things like Jekyll or Hugo. A couple of these blogs in here that I've mentioned are compiled that way. So basically allows you to do, if you feel up to it, Git commits, and then the Git commit re-renders your site for you and allows you to use your content. I personally like it a lot, but it took me a while to get into that flow. It was really annoying to get into the flow. So if it's a blocker for you not to do it this way, do not do it this way. Again, do it the way that's going to get you to start blogging the fastest. And there's also a newsletter. So right now I write on Substack. And that's a great way to get started if you want to write on a regular cadence for a regular audience. I know a couple of people who do things that way. It might be a lot because I think it feels like if you do a newsletter, it feels like there's the pressure to deliver X amount of time. Maybe that's what you want, maybe it's not. Depends, but Substack has a really nice interface for writing, but it's geared more towards having subscribers subscribe to and read your content. So there's different ways to get started. I would explore all of them. There's going to be one that works for you. Again, pick the one that's going to let you start writing the fastest, because the faster you start writing, the faster you create sloppy drafts, and the faster you get to good drafts and good writing, and the faster you get to a cadence and writing. So I think I've said this, but yeah, pick the thing that gives you the least resistance. Okay, so that's all I have for that. I know there are probably a lot of questions. I see a lot of stuff. So I'm gonna stop my sharing here and take questions.
Yeah, we've got a question from Claire, who I believe is Claire from DBT.
Claire.
She wants to know how you deal with imposter syndrome when blogging, or what do you do if people criticize your work, if you have any tips.
I don't know that I've ever really gotten over imposter syndrome. I'm always terrified of being wrong on the internet. So I think a good way to deal with that is, like I said, to have someone else look over your work. Especially if it's a coworker or a friend or someone in the tech industry. And that gives you a really good way to have a sounding board. So if you look at a lot of the blog posts that Paul Graham, as I said before, has, and a lot of people have now started doing this, you'll see thank you to X, Y, and Z for the edits. And that's a really common thing. So that helps you a lot. Another thing is when people criticize your work, if you put in the best faith effort that you can, there's really no reason for it to be bad, I guess I want to say. Maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, but if you try your hardest, if you've edited it, if you've had other people sound off on it, then the criticism is just haters, basically. And again, if you're maintaining a professional tone, and you know what you're talking about, it's probably going to be fine. And there's always going to be someone who does not like what you're saying, which is one of the reasons I would advise not to read Hacker News if your blog gets on Hacker News. But if you're confident in what you're saying, then I think it's fine to tune some of that out, because there's always going to be some of that noise on the internet.
I'm going to grab Sarah's from the chat. So Sarah Gormley asked, how do you gain a sense of authority if you are new to the tech scene?
So it depends on, well, it might depend on what you're blogging about, but it really doesn't. The best way to do it is to blog. Start blogging, write 5, 10, 15, 20 blogs. So again, I didn't feel the sense of authority until I'd been writing technical blogs for maybe 2 years or so. Because at that point, again, you know your tone, you know your content. And the great thing about blogs is it allows you to research what you're talking about. So once you're done writing the blog post, ostensibly, you have that sense of authority because you've researched this issue. You know the ins and outs. You've linked to it. You've written the code. So you have that sense of authority. So you can confidently say, I've done this research. I'm happy to put it out there.
And we've got another question. How did you find an audience? Is it a matter of self-promotion, submitting your stuff to Hacker News, Reddit, wherever, word of mouth?
I think initially I blogged for maybe like 5, 6, 7 years without any audience whatsoever. So I put stuff out on Twitter. And as I got more Twitter followers, more people would read my blog and they would submit it to Hacker News. So I think some of my audience came from there, but it certainly wasn't anything that I personally was chasing. I was really trying to just put out good and useful content. And if you create content like that, and you share it with Twitter, with LinkedIn, with those places, then it's going to get shared around a lot, I think. But just remember that it's going to take time, and it's important to blog about stuff that is interesting or relevant to you, or problems that you have, because if you have the same problem, then chances are other people will have it and they'll commiserate and they'll want to share.
We'll wrap Rich's question, which I'm guessing might be Rich McMillan, co-director of Code for Philly. So he says, thank you for the great presentation. May I ask if you have a process involving Evernote, Trello, Notion, something more like a notebook and pencil, without going full Harper Lee? Do you have any process pointers?
Oh, gee, I have almost no process. Okay, so my only real process is I get ideas for stuff. So I read a bunch of stuff. So I'll read Hacker News, I'll read my Twitter, whatever, and posts that are interesting to me, I'll put in a saved Telegram channel. So if you have Telegram, it's a chat app. You basically have like a saved messages tab in there where you can send stuff to yourself. So and it's searchable. So I'll send those links to myself and I'll kind of let them marinate, and I won't do anything about them right away, but sometimes it'll happen that I'll see a few links about the same thing and I'll be like, okay, now I need to write about this because this is giving me an idea. So then I'll usually start a draft in Google Docs. I'll write the post in Google Docs, and then I'll create it into, so that's the newsletter. For technical posts, I usually get ideas from work or from stuff that I see online, and those will take much longer to put together because there's a technical component. And then I'll write those also. Usually those I'll write in Markdown directly, because you can write Markdown to GitHub pages, and then I'll work on them that way. So I don't really work in notebook and pencil. But I have a place, and again, so my philosophy is path of least resistance. So a lot of people use like Notion or Trello or Evernote. I have all that stuff, but I never use it because it's just so bulky. But I use Telegram all the time to talk to people. So that's just where I keep my links for stuff and I can search them, and it's the path of least resistance. And Google Docs also is always with me. And so that works. And so that's kind of how I write. So I don't know that I have any process pointers, but that's kind of how I do things.
I feel like that's so helpful in that, like saying it's like Telegram drafts, it's like as long as it's somewhere, then that's helpful.
Yeah, literally anywhere that can be searched, basically.
Yeah. So we have another question of, do you
Yep.
share differently on different platforms like Twitter or LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. So I share mostly on Twitter. I try to share, like, I don't know, and so my thing is always, I never try to use hashtags because those to me indicate marketing content, and I'm always trying to speak with my authentic, true voice. So I basically will post, hey, here's a thing I worked on. It took me a while to do this. Come check it out. I don't have like a real strategy other than I always try to come across as human wherever I'm posting, which is kind of weird. But basically, if people understand that there's a person sharing this content and that they went through this journey to research and write this post and learn about X or Y, they're more likely to engage in it. At least I know I am. I don't want to read about, oh, here's how I did a growth hack and I did X and Y and Z and hashtag SEO, whatever. I want to read, like, I want a real person to be communicating to me. I want to know that there's someone on the other side of the screen. So in Twitter, I share that way. LinkedIn is kind of like a little bit different because I punch up the technical keywords a little bit more, but not really. So they're not really different, but I post to each one like manually. I don't have like some marketing system where I do there's like Hootsuite, or there used to be Hootsuite, or there's like timed ways to post a buffer, I guess, to Twitter. I don't do any of that. I just tweet like whenever I have something to share.
Okay, so Jack Benishek asked, do you have any tips or tricks on intelligently navigating the social media blogging landscape to find quality content? You mentioned SEO can play an impact and often breaks up some poorly written articles from TDS or Medium.
Yeah, so my best way is just to find really smart people on Twitter and follow them. So a lot of the blog posts that I've linked in the presentation are just that, literally people that I follow and whose content I know. I tend to be really frustrated with Medium because it always tries to paywall me. And that's one of the reasons I actually I'm taking down the paywall in my newsletter, because it's just like it's hard to access a lot of the different content. But yeah, basically A is my Twitter feed. B is Hacker News. So I will just literally go to Hacker News and read any headlines that are of interest to me. C is Reddit. There are some really good subreddits that I go to for content. One is computers. I'll have to post a link to this, but computer science career questions. And it's people discussing like a lot of the stuff in the tech industry that is usually not discussed in other mediums. Another one is r/machine learning, which is a good place for content. So a lot of these more niche places are very good for content. But honestly, most of the blog posts that I read come from either Hacker News or my Twitter feed, which probably isn't that great for depth. So if anybody has any other good suggestions that they go to, I know like Lobsters is one that some people go to. It's like a very, very niche tech site. If there are other places that people go, I would love to know more about them. Oh, Metafilter is also a good place for like kind of offbeat arcane stuff. And another thing that I read is ALA Daily, Arts and Letters Daily, which is like kind of the really good antidote to tech stuff. Because I like to read just like a wide variety of things, not just tech stuff, to give me context. And that basically posts like the top link for the day from like the Atlantic and the New Yorker, and just different like more long form stuff.
So you have, so we have a question that is, would you suggest keeping technical blog posts and personal essays in separate places?
I don't know. That's hard for me because I always struggle with that. I think it can be helpful to mix the two sometimes. So like even on my technical blog, one of the posts I had was about SoundCloud and how I think a couple years ago they were in danger of going under, and basically like what SoundCloud meant to me as a platform. But then I also did like a technical exploration of the business landscape for SoundCloud. And in my newsletter, a lot of the times I mix the two as well. But I think I would suggest, I don't know, it's very hard for me to say. There's some people who kind of like mix both very well, but I'm always trying to think about whether or not to keep them separate. I don't know. It's hard for me to answer. It really is. And that's always like a boundary that I'm thinking about, like, where does this tech life end and where does my personal life begins? And I think it's something we think about a lot too these days. Like how much of myself do I share on Twitter or not? So I don't know. It's tough.
Sounds like it's a hard question.
It's a hard
So
question. Yeah,
it depends.
it depends.
Well, I'm going to follow on with this one though, because it's related. Is, do you find it hard to switch off when you put so much of yourself into your posts?
I guess it depends on what you mean by switch off. Like, am I thinking? I'm guessing that it means, I'm going to venture to say, but you can correct me, that am I always thinking about posts? Yes and no, in the sense that I am always thinking about like tech stuff in a way. Like I'm always thinking about how different issues impact each other, but I'm not really doing it so much for the blog. I'm just doing it because that's how I'm wired and that's what's interesting to me. If there's something that's more interesting to you than tech, I would also write about that. As long as it's written in a well and interesting way. But I don't find it like switching on and off, because it's something that I'm always thinking about. Like, what's the impact of this on our society? Like, what is this machine learning system? Whatever. It's just something that I'm always like have in the back of my mind. So it's not really work for me per se to not to think about it. I'm just wired that way. And if it does turn into a post, then that's fantastic. Something I do find hard for myself to switch off is like thinking in tweets. I don't know if anybody else does it. And I do think that that's a problem, because I'll think something and then I'll be like, oh, let's reformat this thought as a tweet. So that I do not like, and I would like to do less of. But
Can I
short
ask,
of
is
like,
that because you think about, is it that you think of your thought into a shape of something to be shared, or is like your difference between
yeah,
like a tweet and a long form thought, or like is it what is that there?
I think the former, yeah. I
Okay.
actually I really don't like that social media has kind of done this to me. Yeah, I'll think about something and be like, "Oh, how can I reformat this thought in a way so that it's easier to be shared?" But maybe I don't want to share everything, right? I just want to think some stuff. So I
Yeah.
guess my solution is to that is to turn off the internet for a couple of days. Whenever I do that, I kind of like reset myself.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions to get your coworkers who have different skills and are working on different projects to blog more with you to create a shared knowledge base at work?
So it depends on what the culture of your company is. Just speaking from my personal experience at Automatic right now, we run WordPress.com, right? So internally, we blog everything. We have this product called P2, and it's live for people to use right now in their organizations as well. So one of our sayings is, if you didn't P2 it, then it didn't happen. So everybody's always writing blogs and reading blogs. But I've been in a lot of different environments where that is not the case. And so I would say the best way to do that is for you to start blogging internally and to kind of show your coworkers the benefits of that. Just be prepared that you might have to maintain it at first or always. But the more you make the case for, oh, this is already in here. We can already look at this. We've already encountered this issue, and here's a blog post that I've written about it. Do you want to contribute blog posts as well? So I think the best thing to do in that case is to lead by example and to show and to maintain. And you can do this on Git pages or whatever platform you have internally. Like one company that I was at had hosted GitHub, so I could use Git pages. But you can use literally anything like SharePoint or even Google Docs or whatever you have available. Just start a knowledge base yourself. And I think once people see the value in it, they'll want to contribute to it. And they'll start to see you as a capital thought leader, capital T, capital L, thought leader in your company. So it'll be cool for you as well.
Thanks. And so do you want to do the last question, Marika?
Yeah, last question. You got it, Pam.
Okay. Yeah. So last question, and we're at time. So is that when starting out, any tips on how you decide the scope for a blog post, deadline, number of rewrites, deciding if a blog post is ready to publish, primarily to consistently put out great quality posts on a periodic basis?
Yeah, again, not a good answer to this. It's kind of based on like, once you start writing, you'll get a feel for what your natural deadlines are, how long it takes you to do something. When something is done, you kind of just feel that it's done. And again, the more you blog, the more you get to that point where like, okay, I don't want to write this anymore at all. This has to go out. So I think if I were to start writing, I would time box myself and say, you have a week to work on this, and then it has to go out. Because if you noodle on it for a long time, you could just like end up losing the momentum going forward. And I know I've had this a bunch of times where I had a fantastic idea, I started writing it, and then something else came up, or I didn't think it was good enough, I had to research this and this, and then I just kind of like lost the momentum of that post. So I'm not going to say like just write it and publish it right away, but make sure to cap the time that you want to spend on it. And I think a week is reasonable for most content if you're not writing like a huge post. I would say like 200 words. Yeah, you can do it in 2 to 3 days. Polish it up, spell check it, run it by someone real quick, and put it out there. Yes, do not abandon your drafts, says Eric.
Thank you, Vicki, so much for coming and lending your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Just being a genuinely delightful, positive person in the tech community, and working to make sure that other people can be elevated too. That's so wonderful for us to have. And I'm sure everybody is applauding separately, quarantinely in their own homes. And we will post the slides and any links that Vicki shares with us on the meetup.com event. So you can find it there. I think that's probably the best place for it. If you are interested in Code for Philly, go to codeforphilly.org. If you are interested in participating in any of our projects, which our projects use R, they use Python, they need product managers and project managers and UX designers. So if you're interested in any of those areas, please join Code for Philly, join our Slack channel, check out our projects. And we'll see you in, 18 months.
Thank you for coming, everybody. Thanks for sharing your night with me.
Thanks, Vicki.